Hello, friends. Welcome back to Saturday evening's Wow, I don't even know what day it is. Welcome to a 1D10T does stuff. And I am the 1D10T in charge. Nope, it's just gonna do that. Oh well. I am the 1D10T in charge, Trevor Stewart, and I'm sorry, friends. There we go. Okay, let's try this again. Hello, friends. Welcome back to a 1D10T does stuff, and I'm the 1D10T in charge. We will be watching videos today about how redlining added to racial health disparities in the United States. These Tuesdays are pretty depressing stream. We look at racism and sexism inherent in the medical infrastructures and institutions in the United States. Hey, Maddie. Oh, you do? You've got a fantastic example of that. What example do you have? And while you prepare that, I'm going to do today's ad read. Today's pre-roll is brought to you by the Hidden Leaf, downtown Charlottesville, 105 West Main Street, on the downtown mall, above the bricks, Suite 200, a great place to go with some great buds to get some great buds. A bud, and the only thing better than their bud is their customer service. Also, they have the lowest prices in town, according to my own personally highly biased research, by which I mean I was incredibly high when I did my biased research. Don't forget to check the website for times and events. The website is thehiddenleafcville.com. That's thehiddenleafcville, all one word, .com, where you can find events such as Frosty Fridays, which is where you will find our other two sponsors, Firehouse, where there's smoke, there's Firehouse, and Kush Gang, purveyor of fine edibles and drinkables. A note of disclosure: we are dealing with highly sensitive topics that inflame opinions. So all of the opinions you hear expressed herein belong to me, the expressor of the opinion, the channel, and or the parent company, but not necessarily any of our advertisers, including Hidden Leaf, Kush Gang, and Firehouse. Wow. You can tell I haven't smoked a lot today. I stumbled my way through that. So let me take care of taking my attention deficit disorder meds and see if I can't get my head screwed on straight for watching these videos. I'm interested to hear what examples you have, Maddie. We are starting today with with the video "Black Health Disparities Go Back to Slavery: Discovered Truth," the full documentary. It's gonna be a little long. Okay, Maddie says, in Kansas we have two counties right next to each other, Johnson County and Wyandotte County. Wyandotte. both part of Kansas City, Kansas, and literally next to each other. Johnson County has the highest county health ratings. Wyandotte has the lowest. Johnson is also the wealthiest, and Wyandotte has one of the highest rates of poverty in Kansas. And I'm gonna guess, Maddie, that there is a racial element to those two counties. Hey, Just Crystal. And my guess is that those two, the racial, that as well as a racial element, there is a property value element to it. And the property value element is probably around the old redlining maps that we discussed last week and are going to discuss again this week. As for Kansas City, Missouri, it's one of the most redlined cities in the U.S. due to being one of the first to redline, block, bust, and segregate the city based on a whole lot of things. I'm guessing lot was meant to be in there. Did we... Mostly we focused on Baltimore last week, I think. So yeah, that's the Baltimore is a great example too. Yeah, it really is. You know, I'm curious to see if I can find redlining maps for Charlottesville. Oh, this looks interesting. This article is from Richmond University, but it's until the beginning of the 20th century, most Kansas Cityans did not live in racially segregated neighborhoods, but in socioeconomically and ethnically integrated neighborhoods. For example, the West Bottoms, due to its proximity to the stockyards and slaughterhouses, had 3 residential areas that housed working-class people, many in shanties and tenements where Irish and German immigrants and African Americans were common. It's already deep into gentrifying, yeah. Oh, this is... Oh, and that map is very interesting. Okay, let's do something here. And let's do something here. Oops, not what I meant to do. That's what I meant to do. Okay, now let's go back here. Why don't black and white Americans live together? A BBC title I didn't make. Kansas has been one of the most integrated states in the U.S., though there were a number of segregated and sundown towns. Okay. We'll take a look at that one, too. All right. Why don't black and white Americans live together from the BBC? I'm actually really curious as to the outsider's view of why of what this looks like. Legal segregation in the U.S. may have ended more than 50 years ago, but in many parts of the country, Americans of different races aren't neighbors. They don't go to the same schools, they don't shop at the same stores, and they don't always have access to the same services. No kidding. In 2016, the issue of race will wow. This is old. Will remain high on the agenda in the United States. The police killings of unarmed black men and women over the past few years reignited a debate over race relations in America. The reverberations will be felt in the upcoming presidential election and beyond. Oh my God. Oh, wow. Forget how old I am. Ferguson, Baltimore, and Chicago are three cities synonymous with racial tensions, but all three have another common denominator. They, like many other American cities, are all still very segregated. Scroll down to the maps at least. Okay. Wow. Okay. I mean, we saw Baltimore, last week in those videos. And, okay, Chicago has a pretty... But Kansas City, that is... It's changed a bit, but it's still a solid example. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Oh. So this is what Greater Kansas City looks like right now. These are the redlined areas. Or at least this is what it looked like at time of this. So, as we learned last week, redlining has carried through until modern times, and it's very much been it was very much developed to keep segregated communities, to keep the communities segregated, and to keep certain communities from being able to access generational wealth, to keep certain communities from being able to access adequate. I don't want to say it was developed to keep them from accessing adequate services. It was developed to keep services segregated. I believe we knew then, and we definitely know now, that separate is never equal. That an apartheid of any kind is an injustice to the segregated. And honestly, it's a disservice to everyone. It's having segregated communities does not lead to progress or growth. Personally, socially, economically, in any way, it just does not lead to growth. So what we're going to concentrate on this time, though, what we're going to start doing is bringing this into the realm of how it affects health outcomes, how it affects health outcomes, but also how it takes part in what am I looking to say here? Okay, specifically, I want to see how it shapes a mindset about health and health outcomes. I don't know that I've got that I know where to look for that information specifically, but we'll be trying to find that at some point, that kind of information. This whole thing is because someone very close to me asked the system for help, and the system treated her very poorly, and aggravated her problems instead of helping her. And I am, there's a part of me that feels like I should have been standing up for this before it became personal. And there's a part of me that is looking at this going, you don't know specifically what you're trying to do, so you're gonna have a hard time defining it as you go and knowing if you've managed to achieve anything. 50 years after being outlawed, redlining still drives neighborhood health inequalities. Yes, it does, and we are gonna look at that. Go ahead and look at this real quick. And then we will get into the video, because the video is going to take a while. That's a 26-minute 26-minute video. Oh, no, they're both, they both work. Both of the, both links work. 50 years after being outlawed, redlining still drives neighborhood health inequalities. Discriminatory lending practices continues to have serious effect. I do want to point out that, while redlining itself has been outlawed, zoning is also an issue, yeah. It's not a practice that has been given up. It's masked itself in other ways. And because of the, because of the other systemic pressures on these neighborhoods, you can now redline based on crime statistics. Those crime statistics are not real. They're manufactured numbers. They don't. I hope it goes without saying, but I guess it probably doesn't, that extra policing doesn't mean that there's more crime. It just means more crimes will be found. Things that weren't a crime will be turned into a crime to justify the policing. So those crime statistics can have an effect. There are still cities where private real estate companies will show housing in specific zip codes to non-white people and keep them out of mostly white zip codes. Yes. Yeah. There's that whole thing too, where because there's a human element involved in real estate, in real estate agents, that is a case of individual racism that I think comes from the systemic racism that causes that in the first place. I think. Decades of redlining, a long-standing banking practice that blocked people of color from getting mortgages, continues to perpetuate racial and socioeconomic inequality in the San Francisco Bay Area and across the country, according to ongoing research from UC Berkeley School of Public Health. Although the practice has been illegal since 1968, multiple studies show that redlining's harmful legacy has left non-white communities struggling with air pollution, reproductive health disorders, and fewer urban amenities more than 50 years later. Historical mortgage redlining, one of the many policies designed to uphold structural racism through housing discrimination, has lasting consequences, said Jing Gao, a doctoral candidate in epidemiology at Berkeley Public Health, who studies the relationship between urban environments and health. This holds implications for future policy making to center equity and justice when it comes to housing. It would be neat if I could get an interview with Jing Gao. Redlining dates back to the midst of the Great Depression when the federal government created Homeowners Loan Corporation to provide assistance to homeowners who were defaulting on their mortgages. Bankers assessing financial risk created maps that shaded neighborhoods in accordance with their property values and racial makeup. And mostly that was built around race, not really anything else. Communities with higher proportion of non-white residents were deemed inherently risky and outlined in red. This discriminatory system was widespread and prevented non-white residents from obtaining mortgages. It created generations of injustice as many white Americans built home equity that they could pass down to their children, while most non-white Americans could not. And I feel the need to point out that there was no evidence that lending to non-white borrowers, specifically black borrowers, was more risky than lending to white borrowers. I'm not sure, but I think there might be evidence that the opposite was actually true, that non-white borrowers were more likely to pay back their loans and make less for the bank in interest payment, in interest. Oh, I get it. All of a sudden, I get it. Banks didn't think they were being racist. They just weren't going to make as much money off of the people who were going to reliably pay back their loans. So it was a riskier investment for them because they made less money. No, I think it was racism. I think it was racism. Sounded good for a moment, but I really think it was racism. So, worse air, water, noise pollution. And here's where we get into some of the stuff that we were talking about in the last book we read, Inflamed, Deep Medicine and the Anatomy of Injustice by Rupa Marya and Raj Patel. You know, they talked quite a bit about it, but they couched it in discussing the exposome and the biome and the relationship between there. Probably because the banks only took the most safe of those customers, right? No, it was racism. Yeah, it was racism. I know money and power seem like a good cover for racism. It's like, oh, no, it wasn't racism. It was all about money and power. But I'm beginning to see that, because if it was really about money and power, other behaviors would have come into play. It wouldn't just have been black neighborhoods that were redlined, just racial redlining. It would have been poor and other immigrant communities as well. And they weren't redlined, they were yellow lined, blue lined. But they weren't, you know, economic viability didn't so much matter. It was really, really about race. So saying, trying to pass it off as about money, I think is actually doing a disservice. I've known a few of those boobs. They just need to open businesses. They just need engage in the free market. The free market would magically fix economic segregation. Right? No, yeah. Every time I hear that, I have a knee-jerk reaction. Like, last time they successfully did that, didn't the U.S., drop bombs on them? It's not a free market, for one. Sorry, I'm on my phone and it's not easy to type. No worries. I understand completely. For one, it's very much not a free market. There are systems in place to maintain the flow of money upwards and whitewards. And I mean, of course, whitewards is upwards because it's the system of the economic system of capitalism that we have is based in maintaining white supremacy. I was thinking of the Tulsa Massacre. I think they also did something in Brooklyn, or not, but yeah. But cities and states often destroyed minority communities and businesses and even business districts in the name of urban renewal or development. Central Park is a good example, but so is the freeway market. Exactly. Uh, in Charlottesville, Vinegar Hill is a really good example as well. All I know Vinegar Hill as is the Vinegar Hill Theater. It was a thriving black community before it got redeveloped. And I'm guessing most of the black people got pushed out to Garrett Square, now called Friendship Square, and the Prospect area. Freeway system, not market. Sorry, I heard system when I read market, so you may not be typing well, but I'm not reading that great, so it's okay. We're on the same page. So yeah, there's this is and those neighborhoods, by the way, Friendship Court, formerly Garrett Square, and the Prospect area are, I'm guessing, still very low value, high risk areas, according to the local banks. According to banks. Yeah. Yes. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? That's a great allegory for it. Lanes upon lanes of gleaming metal monstrosities zooming up and down. I don't remember the line that well. And that's my best not Doc Brown, Christopher Lloyd. But yeah, the freeway project. He was going to he was going to destroy Toontown to build it, and that was the allegory of destroying the red line districts to build the freeway system. You can still see where the freeways have bypassed whole neighborhoods, whole sections of cities, and those sections of cities have run down because no one's going there. There's no commerce coming through, and those sections of the cities that A, are getting bypassed, and B, are getting destroyed to build these freeways, or were, they were red line neighborhoods. They were black neighborhoods. So that's where that allegory comes into play in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. When I was a child, when I was younger, I wasn't still a child. I don't remember how old I was when Roger Rabbit came out, but I remember being vaguely aware that it was an allegory for that. I'm not sure, but I think one of my parents may have even said something about that at the time. So it is, and that, as we talked about last week, a whole lot of the New Deal was a New Deal for white people, but it was more of the same old crap for black people. And while I think that the economic concept behind the New Deal was solid. Spend your way out of a depression. It's what I call retail therapy. Its application was steeped in the both individual and systemic racism of the United States. You know, it was still just barely. No, it was still in the Jim Crow South, and honestly, I don't think that the Jim Crow South ever really went away. I think we can use that as a term to describe certain portions of the South, not necessarily geographical portions, but certain demographics of the South. There's still some deeply held Jim Crow beliefs in those demographics. It did de jure, at least, superficially at least. All right, that one I'm gonna need to decode. Oh, Jim Crow, Jim Crow ending. It did. I mean, yeah, superficially. I do. Where was I before that? These. Oh, geez, I lost my place. All right. De jure segregation. De jure segregation refers to legal separations of individual based on race, upheld by laws and regulations. This practice was notably solidified in U.S. Supreme Court Plessy Ferguson 1896, which established separate but equal doctrine, allowing for segregated facilities as long as they were deemed equal. Over time, however, application of this doctrine faced significant legal challenges. Brown v. Board of Education ultimately rejected the notion that separate educational facilities could ever be equal, declaring de jure segregation unconstitutional. Yes. Yeah. De facto segregation is when it's more out in the public. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So, but these forms of segregation do it is more de facto than de jure now, but it is still, there's this segregationist idea still exists. It's not gone away. It's just implicit, not explicit anymore. Facts. Yeah. So, you know, it's there is a part of me You can't have laws engaging in segregation. Exactly. Well, I mean, you're not supposed to. There are still segregationist grandfather clauses in land land ownership, and I'm a little worried. Although I will, if it is there, I'll fight it because F it. I ain't I ain't letting some piece of paper tell me I can't give my land to the lad. I worry that there is one of those grandfather clauses on the land that I currently own, that says that I can't give it to a black person. Because this end of my road, in fact, all of my road is very white. Very, very white. So there may be something in there. And if there is, I will fight it when I'm told that I can't give my land to what's the proper term there? To Granny's perfect old jelly bean. If you know, that's a fight I'm willing to give. I mean, those grandfather clauses usually don't make a distinction between giving or selling. And oh, thank you, Just Me Crystal. And when it comes to the child in question, is getting gived. He's getting everything. This child is, I mean, even if he is not blood related, he is, in my personal estimation, my next of kin. You know, and this is all gonna be his someday. Hopefully I'll have done something, decent with it by then. But, and I can't imagine that those grandfather clauses hold up now in 2025, or will hold up in the ensuing 20 years or so before he's gonna be old enough to take over and do whatever he wants with it. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you. I really don't think. I think I have access to. Hey, knock that off. I think I have access to good enough lawyers that they would be able to call out the questionable constitutionality of that, the questionable legality of it. But all right, let's read this portion of this article really quickly and then get on to the video. Worse air, water, noise pollution. Those currently living in historically redlined neighborhoods are highly vulnerable to air, water, and noise pollutants and other health problems, according to research from UC Berkeley and elsewhere. In 2022, while working as a postdoctoral researcher, Dr. David J.X. Gonzalez and his team found that residents of previously degraded, as in graded D, neighborhoods lived in proximity to nearly twice the density of oil and gas wells as those in formerly graded A areas. Gonzalez, who is now an assistant professor in the BPH division of environmental health sciences, also found that living near oil and gas wells exposed residents to numerous pollutants that can cause cardiovascular disease, impaired lung function, anxiety, depression, and preterm birth. Interesting. Our study adds to the evidence that structural environmental racism contributed to the disproportionate siting of oil and gas wells in racially and socially marginalized neighborhoods, the study authors wrote. Because over 60% of previously graded D communities remain non white, people of color are disproportionately exposed to greater levels of air pollution, despite overall improvements in air quality across the country, according to another 2022 paper written by UC Berkeley researchers, including Rachel Morello Frosch and Josh Apt, and published in Environmental Science and Technology Letters. Crystal says there are still laws on the books that hold up in the Bible Belt. Example, you can beat your wife on the state house steps on Sunday with a belt no thicker than 1 inch. So, it's so gross. It's so wrong. And also, does that mean that gay couples can't hit each other on the courthouse steps with belts? I mean, you know, masculine gay couples, because jeez, I can't help myself. Why, Trevor? Say less. Say less, Trevor. But yeah, those laws, there are a lot of blue laws that are on the books that aren't enforced, that are just, weird. Like, you can't ride your horse in a swimming pool on Tuesdays. Actually, I think it's just you can't ride your horse in a swimming pool. But a lot of those blue laws include disturbing racial and gender overtones, and they assume an amount of violence in human relationships. And now the Trump administration means that any and all of those laws can be brought back, especially with Roberts and SCOTUS. Yeah. 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 And any laws that mitigate them can be gotten rid of. It's a disturbing set of thoughts. Authors conclude that present-day disparities in U.S. urban pollution levels reflect a legacy of structural racism in federal policy making, and resulting investment flows and land use decisions apparent in maps drawn more than 80 years ago. Less green space. Negative outcomes for women's reproductive health. This I want to hear about. Years of economic neglect from redlining has long-term consequences for women's reproductive health, too. Berkeley public health researchers have helped pioneer research into the effects of early housing policy decisions on birth outcome. Their work has found that low birth weight, preterm birth, and other troubling outcomes are associated with socioeconomic deprivation, an attribute far more likely in historically redlined areas. Irene Hayden, a former doctoral epidemiology student and postdoctoral researcher at Berkeley Public Health, found a positive relationship between gestational weight gain and neighborhood deprivation, or few economic, educational, and housing resources, in a 2018 study. Nardone strengthened these findings 2 years later using data from California Office of Statewide Health and Planning and Development, and his team examined preterm birth, low birth weight, and perinatal mortality and small for gestational age deliveries in Los Angeles, Oakland, and San Francisco, alongside Dr. Mahasin Mujahid, chair of Berkeley Public Health Division of Epidemiology. Nardone determined that adverse birth outcomes were related to worsening HOLC grades. This past fall, doctoral candidate Gao studied severe maternal morbidity, life-threatening pregnancy complications before or after delivery in redline neighborhoods. Prior studies had shown that the built environment is a significant determinant of reproductive health, but research had not yet made the connection with severe maternal morbidity. We wanted to take a step back and examine the socio-political mechanisms that produce the differential neighborhood social and maternal conditions in the first place, Gao said. She added that by considering issues such as housing discrimination and segregation in their analysis, her colleagues would be able to address racial inequities in severe maternal morbidity. Gao studied roughly 24,500 cases of severe maternal morbidity across 8 different California cities, from San Francisco Bay Area to San Diego between 1997 and 2017. Using census tract level HOLC maps, Black and Hispanic residents in historically degraded neighborhoods showed greater risk of illness than other racial groups. Discriminatory lending practices continue to have devastating effects on low-income people of color nearly 100 years after the first redline maps were created by the Homeowners Loan Corporation in 1933. Residents in historically degraded neighborhoods are highly susceptible to serious health complications such as cardiovascular disease and maternal morbidity due to decades of strategic disinvestment. Without considerable intervention to supply cleaner air, access to parks, and other environmentally enriching amenities to vulnerable communities, this trend is likely to continue. Further research into past and present discriminatory housing practices are thus the beginning of addressing racial inequalities in public health. Agreed. Agreed. All right. Now, on to the video. Where I think we will probably discover, again, this will reinforce probably this will reinforce, and hopefully it will go more in depth into those things, those medical outcomes, those reasons for. That article was a pretty good overview on what I'm trying to look at here. And after we revisit the book Fearing the Black Body, I plan on starting to look at how sexism is affecting health outcomes. It's all interconnected. Yes, it is. That's why it's so complex. Yes, it is all interconnected. It is all very interconnected. There is a deeper there's a deeper health issue than just the lack of proper food, or the being in proximity with bad air, bad water, and lack of green spaces. It's this mental health toll that both comes from living in a place that is lack of proper housing and equality. Yeah. It's this toll that comes from living in this place that is degraded. It's also this psychic toll that comes from being in a society that's trying to tell you that is your worth, that your value is lesser, so you belong in a lesser place. And that, because I have seen, and this is anecdotal, but I have seen the health toll that happens to people who are raised, to black people who are raised in a relatively middle class neighborhood with access to middle class food and spaces and healthcare, and that still there's this, because of the societal systemic racism, these people are still having worse health outcomes. They are still having health issues that that are consistent with the health issues of those in the more impoverished areas. And I think that has a large part to do with the cognitive dissonance of being a second-class citizen. In the last two books we read, we have read examples of people who, because of their race, weren't believed by their doctors, and that had an effect on their health outcomes. Now, there was there was an example of someone who stood up for themselves and didn't listen to what the doctor said and loudly self-advocated and survived. And then there was a case study of somebody who didn't loudly self-advocate, aggressively self-advocate, and didn't survive. And, I think a large part of the health toll that is taken is in the way that Black and people of color are discouraged from self-advocating. I think that has a large. I think that has a role in the negative health outcomes. And women. And women. And women. That's also a large part of what we're studying here. And women. And women are encouraged to not self-advocate in a similar way to Black men, to Black people. Black women are even more so, and I think it's exponentially more so, encouraged to not self-advocate. There is a prevalent stereotype of a loud, abrasive, pushy Black woman that I'm guessing most Black women don't want to be. They don't want to have that stereotype thrust upon them. That stereotype really is not real. That's not really real. And the whole concept of women being shrill is, again, also not real. Women aren't pushy or shrill. What they are is reacting to a male-dominated society that is trying to silence them. Kansas City was so segregated that mortuaries refused to accept non-white people, with some being forced to use the back door. That's the ultimate refusal of care and service. That body and health care even after death. Yeah. Yeah. That is... I mean... Yeah. That is really gross. And the U.S. and most modern societies have some really weird stuff around death and dead bodies. But all of that is for other days of the week. There's somebody I watch on a regular basis, I think Catherine Doherty, and she's an undertaker, and she does some great videos about how we handle dead bodies and about some of the really weird stuff that goes on. Also, she does a great job of making a case for green burials and alternative post-life accommodations. Yeah. Okay. Let's get into the video. I know I've been saying that for 45 minutes now. right? Is it just me, or did they like almost start with the Halloween theme? I mean, that sets a mood. That sets a whole mood.
From education to employment, income to home ownership, African Americans endure a range of inequalities. But the gaps in health and wellness might be the most ominous of all these disparities.
For too many of us, our primary health care comes in emergency rooms. Instead of preventive care, we're in catastrophic care.
African American men who, at an alarming rate, have been diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Health disparities between Black women and white women are well documented.
Did you know that African Americans are almost twice as likely to have diabetes?
I would have to say, just based off of the patient population that I've experienced, during my time here in Minnesota in my professional career, and even in residency, we as African Americans will present one for later stages for cancers, more malignant forms of hypertension, uncontrolled diabetes, overweight. There's also some resistance to the whole health culture.
Mental health issues are real, and we have to understand that we can't pray away everything.
Your health transfers over into...
I heard about a program, Timu Halloween soundtrack. I don't know. I think it was a really good choice because it set the ominous tone. So I heard about a program training barbers in mental health care. Because that's where Black men are most likely to be most open to receiving mental health care, is at the barbershop. And I thought, I mean, that's brilliant. I think it's great. I think it's a great step considering the problems we have now. I also think that it's absolutely shameful that we're at a point where we have such a stigma against mental health care that we need to reach out to the barbers to bring the health care, that I'm also a firm believer in that even the most healthy of us probably need a counselor, someone to talk to. And it's not, it's for maintenance purposes. It's not because not because we are at this point inherently a really messed up society, although we are. I really do think that just having a counselor at all times is helpful for everyone, and that there should be no stigma about getting help, about having help. Right. But also those were traditional bear systems. You don't want to torpedo it just because it's not formalized healthcare systems. Correct. And I do think that I think that anyone engaging with the public in such a way, I almost want to say intimate way, will serve their clientele better by having mental health training. I mean, imagine if we gave mental health training to sex workers. The outreach alone would be, like, the number of men getting help would be amazing. I really do think it's a great idea. I just also think it's shameful that our society is so already messed up. And yeah, the other part of that, to take us back to the video, you can't pray away. There's a lot of mental health and emotional health stuff you can't just pray away. However, and I think this is different in white and black communities, I think that the church, especially in black communities, is probably one of the most stable places to get help, just to get help of any kind, to get emotional and mental help, to get community, to get help with ailments, to get help with keeping your house or keeping fed. I mean, I don't I also don't think that, I think that it's wonderful that it's there. I think that it shouldn't be relied on. We shouldn't be in a place where these traditional systems need to be relied on. And I feel like we should be able to have a government that takes care of us, that makes these community places for community, so that you can go to the barber shop and talk crap about sports players that you don't like, or that somebody else does like, and you just want to watch them, crash out about it. And church isn't a place you should go for help on this plane. It's a place you should go for help with your soul. Church shouldn't have to be burdened with helping people survive. It's wonderful that church takes up the burden, but that shouldn't be the burden placed on churches, on barbershops, on bars. I know people who the bar is their church or their barbershop, and it's the bartenders who bear the weight of this counseling. These third spaces, these places where we gather, D&D groups. Oh my God, the amount of mental health work that goes into D&D. These places, though, we should have progressed past the need for these spaces to be where we get our mental health help. Yeah. I was just thinking about this one game that I'm playing in right now, and I think I might be working through some parental issues in this game, some family issues in this game. And I don't think that the person running the game necessarily realized that that's what this was going to be for me. is what it is what it is. Because we live in a time that we live in, we find the help where we can. I don't think I know a single D&D streamer that's 100% mentally healthy and or neurotypical. Yeah. I don't think D&D appeals to the neurotypical or mentally healthy. I mean, you ain't gotta be crazy to play D&D, but it sure helps. Yeah. I should have been my first clue that I was not neurotypical, that I was neurospicy was I wanted to play D&D somewhere around the age of 4 or 5. I saw the old hippies playing it and I was like, ooh, fun. You know, and if my parents had just leaned into the idea of teaching me math for fun, I might have learned math a little better. Just talking about D&D streamers. I mean, I'm not sure I know a single streamer who is mentally healthy or neurotypical when it comes to it. I think, much like stand-up comedians, I think there has to be something fundamentally going on for you that you feel the need to share your life with a camera. But D&D streamers, I think, is one of those convergences where it's like intersectionality. That's where the real crazies hang out. The most successful D&D streamer that I watched just got diagnosed with autism and ADHD over the past year. Tracks. That tracks. Ooh, shiny squirrel. But that's his professional job. There you go. I'd like to think that this is my professional job, but I don't think professional has any place in this. All right, let us keep going with this.
To other parts of your life. If you're sick, you can't go to work. So in terms of the economy, so it's kind of a ripple effect.
These medical inequities are complicated by daunting and convoluted approaches to health insurance.
I have a slight heart murmur, and so it led to me being categorized as uninsurable. I ended up having to pay $800 a month, and with a $6,000 deductible, $3,000 for me and $3,000 for my children. Just the weight of premium and deductible. We have this dark cloud overhead. Pastor is a trusted voice, and so that's why I'm stepping forward. That's why I'm basically sharing my story. And being a pastor, you see what happens to a lot of people who are not insured, young people and old people. Young people are really not thinking through just how important healthcare is and living a healthy lifestyle is.
Healthcare concerns may be far from the minds of many millennials, but feeling invincible can keep some young adults from considering healthcare options.
My generation and the generation after me being accountable to making sure that we are engaging.
We want to know the nuts and bolts behind this. I'm an active member with the Temple of Hip Hop, which is KRS-One's organization.
You gotta keep doing this, yo, K, we're pursuing this.
I'm one of the official hip hop cultural specialists that have been directly guided and taught by KRS-One as well as Ministers in Aru. What I do is just looking at everything through a hip hop lens. I mean, in essence, hip is a form of knowledge. To be hip is to be updated and relevant. Hop is a movement. So hip hop, in essence, is about intelligent movement. And so we're not just going to blindly follow just because the masses say, hey, go sign up for health care.
Exclusion, discrimination, and the historic trauma that follows have created barriers to black participation in these systems.
Over 200 years of a sort of hesitation towards the government structures and institutions and corporate structures and institutions. So there's a lot of, we don't want to go to the doctor because we don't trust you.
And I think that definitely goes back towards, of course, the Tuskegee experiment. The healthcare system itself, it has created some distrust, and I definitely do understand that.
My parents grew up in the Deep South in Jackson, Mississippi. When my mother had a toothache, of course, they could not go in the front door. They had to go to the back door. They wouldn't actually feel your tooth. They would actually pull them. And so what it developed in her is this apprehension about going to the dentist that she lived with for many, many, many years, even after moving to Minnesota. And that kind of fear, I think, is pretty pervasive within the African American community. It's a fear that emanates from a historical reality.
This historical reality is that African Americans have been neglected and mistreated by medicine, health insurance, as well as banking and other financial systems.
African Americans didn't come to this country.
Now, and I'm sure they'll probably say this later, but this isn't just some sort of cultural, remembered, instinctual fear. The fear is perpetuated through each generation because it's never remedied. It's not like your grandmother, your great-grandmother had this fear, but then, by your mom, everything was okay, so you shouldn't have this fear. Every generation has continued to face these aggressions in the healthcare system. This country has never underwent a truth and reconciliation process. Right. It has not. And that's part of that process is gonna be reparations, is gonna be bringing not just, erasing race from the current system, but it's gonna be recognizing that race has been a problem and elevating BIPOC individuals so that the playing field is not just the current playing field is fair, but the future playing field is fair. And, the truth part of that is looking to the past and going, well, here's all of the horrible things we did. And some of the reconciliation process is recognizing it in the moment and starting to dismantle the systems that perpetuate it. But another part of it is the reparations. The other part of the reconciliation is the reparations process, where you pay for the past and you elevate the future. This part of it is what a lot of reactionary conservatives scream isn't fair. They see it as being as being as unfairly advantaging, being an unfair advantage to black people or other marginalized groups, and other marginalized groups, and they scream, "It isn't fair." This is, I think, currently apparent with the debates around Black History Month and Pride Month. You know, and the why don't straight white guys get a month? And it's because every month is Straight White Guy Month. So that, what those reactionary conservatives see as unfair isn't. And they are just wrong. And I know that saying things like they're just wrong doesn't open up dialogue so that I can meet them where they are, so that I can change their minds. However, there are certain core principles that I have to stand on. And those core principles of equity and equality don't necessarily appear fair to those with power. No, F them. They don't want to open up or dialogue. No, they don't. They don't. That's the thing, is like, the idea of debate me, change my mind, it's a distraction to keep me from doing things or having bigger thoughts, thinking and doing things that could actually be useful. It's not a fair discussion or debate. No, it isn't. They aren't there in good faith. And, I mean, I feel like that's the only reason I would get involved in a debate with someone like that, is so that I could say, you are debating in bad faith, which makes you a bad debater. Thank you, Lockpick. I'm sorry your internet sucks right now. Thank you so much for the 6 month. Much love. We are currently being distracted from watching. I am currently distracting myself from watching the rest of this video about black health disparities. These debates are a way of distracting, a way of taking out, keep taking us away from the real, just the real in general.
As buyers and sellers and participants in the market in a traditional way, we were the property in the market that was being bought and sold.
Medical experiments, malnourishment, poor hygiene, sexual assault, exposure to disease, violence, and many other maladies were visited upon the physical and mental health of enslaved Africans.
The other thing that many people don't know is that for us, on many plantations, health care was attended to by veterinarians,
and profiting the debate
not
bros.
by physicians. So there's been a long, deep distrust of health and the care of our people.
The medical and scientific community supported racist ideology with diagnoses specifically for blacks. Medical science even identified being black as a disorder, calling it negritude.
The slave owners had to justify their treatment of my ancestors by convincing themselves that we were an inferior people. Therefore, denying health care, denying education, denying family.
This act of convincing started, from what I can tell, started with it started right around the time of the Reformation, and it started with it wasn't the Lutherans, it was the next group, wasn't it? But it started in Europe, in Europe, and at the time of the Reformation, and as the ideas around European health and beauty were beginning to solidify, because, okay, at the time, ideas about health and beauty were the same. Beauty meant health. I mean, you didn't... the dehumanization, the medical dehumanization of black people, and others, but this stratification of race having to do with health and beauty. Colonialism. Yes. See, well, I mean, yeah, there was colonialism before that, but really this whole sort of racial dehumanization behavior started with colonialism, with the colonialism as we know it. Oh, colorism. Yeah. Colorism started with colonialism. And see, this is why we need to go back over Fearing the Black Body. Because this is where they talked about it. This is where that stuff came up. Let's see if I can find... I'm in the correct chapter. Oh well. Yeah, this is where a lot of that timeline gets talked about. And that the colorism, and she's right, by the way, about why, it was this need to justify colonialism and slavery, this need to justify the idea of manifest destiny, like it is because we're white and greater than, it is our destiny to be everywhere and have everything. And so the colorism, that was a required component of building this idea. And this is where that the mental health disparities thing that cognitive dissonance, this is sort of where some of that starts, with these people being dehumanized, forced into being lesser, to justify power, cash, and land grabs. I think, as well as, of course, the physical health disparities that come from the concepts that came out of these justifications. The idea that black people don't feel pain, which is, again, I just don't like. How do you, what the heck? Where does that? But these ideas come out of the dehumanization process that they were put through in order to justify a power structure, which again started at around the time of the Reformation in Europe, when colonialism was really starting to take off. When modern colonialism was really starting to happen. Jeez. Colorism. I need new glasses is part of the problem. Like, I can't actually read my monitor I am arm's length away from my monitor and I can't actually read it. And it doesn't start getting clear again until about probably 6 feet, 5-6 feet away.
So they could live with themselves.
Following slavery, from Reconstruction through Jim Crow segregation, separate but equal laws perpetuated the unequal access to health care. Some scholars conclude that much of today's health disparities are directly attributable to the slave health deficit and all that followed. But too often the focus is on the problems, pain, and pathos found in African American history. Discovering truth, revealing little-known realities, and surprising stories can offer inspiration and instruction, even in the world of healthcare insurance and other forms of financial self-sufficiency.
You've heard before how we couldn't get pork chops, so we made chitlins a delicacy. Well, in the same vein, we had African American leaders, primarily coming out of our religious community, ministers like Absalom Jones and Richard Allen, who at the end of the 18th century, while we were still struggling with slavery and disconnects of all sorts, created, out of their religious fervor, mutual aid societies.
Richard Allen, along with a number of other Black Methodist bodies that came together, formed the African Methodist Episcopal Church and had our first general conference in 1816. The AME Church, initially started from what we like to consider as the first sit-in Philadelphia in 1787, led by Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, and some worshipers at St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, where they were not welcome to worship freely. After they completed their prayer, they walked out and they started the Free African Society, which was a benevolent society that was really focused on caring for those that really were having trouble caring for themselves.
The Free African Society's Articles of Incorporation, written in the spring of 1787, call out a concern with health and wellness that resonates across the centuries as they stated, "A society should be formed without regard to religious tenets, provided the persons lived an orderly and sober life, in order to support one another in sickness and for the benefit of their widows and fatherless children.
African Americans pool their funds.
Did we really have to throw sober in there? I'm just saying, like, if you're making sobriety a tenant for society, unfortunately, I gotta be on the outside of that. The sentence, "I am too sober for this crap," has run through my head many and many a time. Sober? No, thank you. But I think what they mean by sober life isn't really sobriety as a practice of non-intake of chemicals, but probably more like a serious approach to life, being sober-minded in that you're not being frivolous, you're not being wasteful. I am all frivels. I do not fit a sober life or sober mind whatsoever. Oh. Ain't that a sobering thought? All right.
Funds that we might be able to bury our dead, that we might be able to take care of the widows, that we might be able to provide some health care for the youth.
We can find mutual aid societies providing protection, providing funds for food, for education, libraries, homes that were founded for orphans of color who had nowhere to go, who couldn't be part of orphanages that served white people. All of these sorts of things, as at the same time they were fighting against slavery.
From the very beginning, I mean, the black church was everything to the African American. I mean, it was a place where we did our theology, of course, and our politics. It was our conservatory of music. It was everything for the African American family and the African American child.
The gospel of Jesus Christ is about wholeness for people. If you look at Jesus in the Gospels, as the story is told, he's always concerned about the wellness of people. People who were blind, he wanted to have sight. People who were deaf, he wanted them to be able to hear. People who were crippled, he wanted them to be able to walk straight. And people who were even having issues with emotions, he wanted them to be whole, right? And so the church should operate the same way.
The scriptures say that it is the desire of God that we prosper in our health in the same way that our soul would prosper. The holistic kind of philosophy that undergirds the black church comes out of our kind of collective struggle. And so we have to address and have had to address these kinds of issues collectively.
It is wonderful that there are individuals who read the Bible this way. I think that it is it's very gratifying. Gratifying? It's the wrong word. It's very hopeful. Gives me lots of hope that there are people who can read the Bible and take these messages away. To a large degree, those were not the messages from the Bible that were pushed towards me. The Bible messages pushed towards me were a lot more There was a lot more fire and brimstone in the Bible verses that I heard. And mainly that fire and brimstone was aimed at me. My personal experiences with the church aside, again, I think that it is an integral part of the community. Especially, I think it's life-saving in these communities to have people who read the Bible for those messages. As opposed to the other ways that the Bible can be presented. Yeah.
For some time.
Well, it's an important model because at the time, there was no insurance for black folks.
These historic works of these heroes evolved from mutual aid societies to, as we move further down the line, African American insurance companies, the Atlanta Lifes, the Golden State Mutuals, the Supreme Life Insurances, the North Carolina Mutuals.
A multi-million-dollar enterprise operated solely by and for Negroes. Inside the home office this morning, switchboard operators, clerks, stenographers, bookkeepers, and secretaries.
Over the past century, there's been a huge asymmetrical political support and funding by the conservatives and Republican parties for right-wing conservative religious beliefs and leaders, even as the federal government stalked and targeted left-wing religious leaders, groups, and belief systems. How very, very true. I feel like it really started to become apparent around the time of Nixon and at the time it was called the silent majority, but then it turned into the moral majority. And then by the time I was reaching my late teenage years and early 20s, it was family values movement. The family values that they were pushing excluded me completely. There was nothing about me that fit into the family values model of society. Except for that I just did not like Limp Bizkit or Korn. I could not stand either band, which made me still not fit into the family values model.
Prepare for a routine day's work with their usual composed dignity.
These came as responses of a community that was left out, that decided it needed to take care of itself.
Charles Spaulding makes his way through the busy third-floor office to the early struggle of youth, the three white collars, and the day he closed his struggling grocery store to become general manager of Durham's first Negro insurance company, the North Carolina Mutual and Provident Association.
What they did was so much a part of what our people did. Our people have always felt that they needed to lead the way in resolving those problems.
I do like nu metal. I just don't like Limp Bizkit or Korn. Yeah. I was more into, and am still more into, Linkin Park, System of a Down. Coal Chamber, I don't know if they qualify as nu metal. They're sort of more hardcore. They were closer to hardcore. Yeah, I didn't dislike nu metal. Really, I disliked Jonathan Davis and Fred Durst. Which is why that one song they did where they made fun of each other actually ended up on my regular rotation. I could listen to the two of them tear each other apart all day. But otherwise, yeah, no, just they didn't. And it was the personalities of those two people that really turned me off. You know, also, I felt like Korn was a very bland version of Rage Against the Machine. I think that was the other part of it that was like, you know, they didn't land for me because I felt like I felt like they just didn't measure up to the thing that came right before them. You know, again, musically progressive and enjoyable. Just the frontmen of both bands. Nah, I'm good.
You look back on history and you look back on our ancestors and our current elders and their ability to take ownership of the health of our community, you know, was so powerful.
Cooperatives offered another avenue of economic self-reliance.
We think about slavery as an economic institution. You can see why it would be very easy and seem like common sense to many African Americans to form economic cooperatives that actually go against the grain of that hyper-individualistic, exploitative capitalism, because they and their families and their friends had been debased by that kind of capitalism. And you see figures from Du Bois to Ella Baker to Ida B. Wells and others calling for African Americans to not turn their backs on trying to build wealth, but to do it in a different way, a way that would not be so exploitative. In Oklahoma, this section of Tulsa that had lots of African American owned businesses, and people like to call it the Black Wall Street of the Midwest. Well, Wall Street has this connotation of hyper-capitalism, making money, getting a good return on your investment. But obviously, the people who put together what we call Black Wall Street in hindsight were working together the whole time. It's not that they were trying to leverage futures or something like this. They were bringing people together, creating credit unions, grocery stores, small businesses that they knew people in their neighborhood would frequent, and they also knew were under siege. And unfortunately, in this case, that came true with a white race riot that just completely destroyed that part of town. Many people have started to talk.
I remember in one of my history classes, someone asked about the Tulsa, Oklahoma riot, and my history teacher, she was savvy. She was a savvy person. She was very careful to point out that she wasn't really allowed to teach us about it in the classroom. But if there were questions, she might be able to field them outside of class. And the individual who asked about it then went on to tell us what they knew. And all she was allowed to do is say, yeah, that's pretty much what happened, but we're not allowed to talk about that in class. And it's weird because I always thought of her as a very strong-willed person who wasn't going to be told what she could or couldn't teach. And the school was definitely not a school where that sort of thing would have been shied away from in the curriculum. That would have been... So it felt like there was something state or federal level where it was just like some strongly worded don't talk about this kind of thing. So yeah, that's it is a strange memory. And, you know, I know that memory is not a reliable thing.
Again, about the history of the Southern Tenant Farmers Union, which brought sharecroppers together to pool their resources and try to get better ways of selling their crops and getting fair prices, as well as fair rent on the lands that they worked. So these spaces we usually think of as places where people are just hiding and scared and waiting for the civil rights movement decades from now to happen. But actually, if we look at this history very closely, we can see people across the country banding together and trying to make a better life by using these cooperative entities to leverage the power of the group.
The strong history of African American labor unions offers yet another example of effectively engaging in economic systems.
People know what a union is in terms of laborers negotiating with management. However, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which is one of the most important labor organizations founded by African Americans, also had a ladies' auxiliary. And those two organizations, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and their Ladies Auxiliary, created cooperative economic institutions, including grocery stores and credit unions, to help members and their communities become economically stronger. We don't want to romanticize the kind of self-reliance efforts that occurred during the Jim Crow or slavery past. People making pretty bold statements about how Jim Crow helped keep Black people together. I think that's a very dangerous path to go down. However, I think it is important for us to relearn or learn for the first time a lot of the stories of African American community cooperative economic development.
While African Americans have had to create self-sufficient systems for healthcare since the first decades of nationhood, the broader American journey towards affordable
I think we are going to stop here this week, and we will pick it up next week. We've been going for a couple of hours already. Yeah, I think we've gotten to a pretty good... What we've gotten through is sort of the opening. We've gotten through the description of how how the historical perspective of distrust came to be. We've discussed the we've discussed the development of the mutual aid networks and the community coming together that occurred in the past. And I have a feeling that what we're going to get to here shortly is, and how that's both affecting and being affected by the modern institutions. But I don't know for sure. We'll find out when we watch this again next week. I feel like we've done a pretty good job of covering a lot of other ground as well. I don't think that this documentary is going to come back to redlining. But that's okay. I think we've started to make the connections between redlining and health disparities. And we will hopefully continue to. But thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Lockpick, for dipping in. I know you're it's about to make a dip-in joke there, but no, I'll leave that alone. No, your internet's not great, but thank you for being here anyway. Maddie, thank you for everything. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all your contributions to the conversation. It might not just be a direct correlation between the two as you might think, but more complicated. I think that is more true about everything in life than any of us know. Physicists and mathematicians are always looking for the elegant, simple solution. And while there may be some simple and elegant solutions, the most simple and elegant solution is always the one that works. It's only ever... I might also want to check out the streamer Professor EXP. He's a DEI sociology professor streamer. Ooh. He could help me out too. All right. Professor EXE. I shall have to look into that. Thank you. So yes, life is always, everything is always going to be more complicated than we think. But back to the redlining and health disparities. That's, yeah. There's not, it's way more complex than I'm thinking, than I have any clue of. Which really is a challenge for these streams. But hey, it's what we do. So thank you, Just Me Crystal, for being here. I always appreciate you being here. Thank you. And thank you, all you lurkers. Much love. Stick around for the raid. And now's the time on the show when I say, as they say around here, 2 up, 2 down. VA, double deuces. I'm out, y'all.
What happens to all of the information that has been compiled?
Yeah, that's a good question and hard to answer in the abstract. Maybe I'll give you 2 answers. First, about Bob Mueller. Robert Mueller is an institutionalist who cares deeply about the institution, the rule of law, and the values at the heart of the Justice Department. And so he will do whatever he can within the law to make sure that those values are protected. Second, I don't see firing Rod Rosenstein or Robert Mueller, frankly, as effective. If the president's goal is to shut down an investigation, he would literally have to fire everyone in the Department of Justice and the FBI to accomplish that, and that's impossible because someone will replace those people and some agents will continue the work. And the good news for people about the institutions of the Department of Justice and the FBI is that they are ballast. They are incredibly difficult to change, and that's frustrating when you're a leader trying to change some aspect of the culture, but it's reassuring today. Those people do not care about partisan politics, and if 7 people are fired, the 8th person will pick up the shield and march on and do the job. So we literally have to fire everyone in those organizations to accomplish his goal.
But my understanding is that the acting director overseeing the investigation can take the final report and basically put it in his drawer and leave it there.
I guess in theory, I would think that would be very, very hard in practice, given the institutional interests of Congress. Even though they've been slow to awaken, I know people in Congress on both sides of the aisle care deeply about finding the truth. And so I think in theory, but it'd be very difficult in practice.
So President Trump has tweeted many times about you. He accused you of leaking classified information for which you should be prosecuted. On Sunday, he tweeted, "The big questions in Comey's badly reviewed book aren't answered, like, how come he gave up classified information, parentheses, jail? Why did he lie to Congress, parentheses, jail?" He's saying that you should be in jail. At least that's how I interpret what he's saying. Is that dangerous when the president says that the former FBI director should be put in jail?
Yes, and think about how far the erosion of our norms has come in just a year, that's not shocking to people. Because he's threatened to jail and ordered the Department of Justice to jail lots of others before me. And the good news is it's noise, and those institutions follow the facts and the law, and the facts here are clear. He's just making stuff up. But it's a sign of the danger from this forest fire. We can't become numb to that, and we have to point it out when it happens and not say, oh, that's just another one of those, because it is not normal. It is not okay for the President of the United States to say that a private citizen should be in jail. Now, I happen to be that private citizen, and so it actually does not bug me much. It doesn't freak me out. But the fact that it doesn't is a sign of the way our norms have changed.
So the day after you were fired, the president was in the Oval Office meeting with the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, and the Russian ambassador to the U.S., Kislyak, and he told them, I just fired the head of the FBI. He was crazy, a real nut job. I face great pressure because of Russia. That's taken a lot of heat off. I'm not under investigation. Do you think that saying that to the Russians was a violation of any law?
I don't know. It obviously is an encounter that would be of